about a week or two ago on how the Gerson therapy specifically, not any other therapy other than one other therapy, is being censored by YouTube, Google, the World Health Organization, and the medical industrial complex as we know it. It's a really powerful video on what's going on currently regarding the Gerson therapy. So getting back to, the history of my history with the Gerson therapy, Charlotte Gerson spoke at my school, and immediately I fell in love with the Gerson therapy. And recognizing my passion for her father's therapy, she invited me to come live with her at her home in San Diego in 1999, where she had all her father's handwritten files of all his active patients between 1910 and 1959. When he died, she had them in her garage. And she asked me to come live with her for 2 to 3 months to go through those files and study her father's handwritten files. I'm one of, maybe a handful of people left alive today that have ever touched and laid hands on those files. So, that's my history with the Gerson therapy. And then, Dr. Gerson himself, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, he called Dr. Max Gerson one of the most eminent geniuses in medical history. Albert Schweitzer, 8 years before he won the Nobel Prize, suffered from severely advanced diabetes. Dr. Gerson cured him in 6 weeks. That's standard across the board. You have advanced diabetes, type 2, chances are within 6 weeks, we have people off of all their medications. Schweitzer's wife, Helena, had terminal tuberculosis. She literally had 6 months to live or less, and Dr. Gerson completely cured her of her tuberculosis using the same exact treatment. And then their daughter, Raina Schweitzer, she had an undecipherable skin condition that Dr. Gerson also completely cured using his therapy. So, as I said, that, the Gerson therapy, it's not just reversing advanced cancer. It is successfully treating a vast majority of your degenerative diseases today. And when we're finished, you'll understand why. You are going to get a crash course in biochemistry 101 in the next hour, and you will understand more about how to successfully prevent and treat, advanced diseases more than the greatest medical doctors on the planet, who walk into school, the cream of the crop, and walk out the most brainwashed, deceived, and ignorant doctors on the planet. And we're going to go through the science behind the Gerson therapy. So, Nobel Peace Prize winner Albert Schweitzer called Gerson one of the most eminent geniuses in medical history. And when he said that, he said one of the most eminent because he had to lend credence to Hippocrates, who to this day is considered the greatest physician that ever lived, and Paracelsus, who, was essentially mentored by Hippocrates. And so Gerson actually derived a lot of his treatment and his ideas from Hippocrates and Paracelsus. And so Gerson was born in 1881 in Poland when it was annexed by Germany. It was actually considered Germany at the time, but it is now Wagrowiec, Poland. And he was born in 1881, and he literally was a genius. To get into college back at that time, you had to pass an exit exam out of high school. And to get on his calculus portion of his exit exam out of high school, his calculus professor put a question on there that he'd never seen before. But he managed to come up with such an elaborate solution that his teacher couldn't even tell him if it was right or wrong. And so she sent it to all the German math professors in Germany at that time, and every single one wrote back that we have a mathematical genius within our country, and they all tried to recruit him for math. And when this happened, Dr. Gerson's family, and they all decided to get together at Dr. Gerson's house. He wasn't a doctor yet. He was obviously still a kid. He was 18 years old. And they all sat down, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, and they all discussed what Dr. Gerson should study when he goes to university. And they all agreed he should study medicine because they felt that's where he would have the greatest impact on humanity. And so here we are 120 years later, roughly, and quote, the cure for cancer and all these other degenerative diseases have not been found. Well, obviously, this is exactly why Dr. Gerson's therapy is the most censored therapy in the history of medicine, because it would obliterate the pharmaceutical and medical industrial complex as you and I have come to know it. and he is the biggest threat. And if you go back and you watch the video that I published a couple of weeks ago talking about what has happened now in the realm of censorship of the Gerson therapy specifically, you will have a clear understanding as to why and how they're doing it. So Gerson, he decides he's going to study, his family and he decide he's going to study medicine. So he goes to university in Germany at that time, right around 1900, and he's suffering from severe migraine headaches. Well, he completely cures himself of his severe migraine headaches by radically changing his diet, cutting out all the salt, all the fat, all the processed foods, the meat, the beer, the alcohol of the standard German diet of that time, which pretty much is the standard world diet and certainly American diet of today. Well, he cut it all out and he cured himself of his migraine headaches. Well, when he opened up practice in Bielefeld, Germany upon graduation, he started treating people with this migraine diet. When people started coming to him cured of their tuberculosis at a time when tuberculosis was destroying and killing millions of people around Europe. And so Gerson became renowned around Europe for having cured tuberculosis. And when he embarked on a study with Ferdinand Sauerbruch, who was Europe's leading thoracic surgeon, doing surgery on all these TB patients, even Sauerbruch told him, if you can cure but one of these patients, I'll believe every single word you have to say. And they embarked on a study together of 460 TB patients. Gerson cured 450 of them. And so the cure for tuberculosis had been found, so to speak. Well, he continued to do his migraine diet, treat people with tuberculosis. And it wasn't until later, around the mid 30s, I believe, when he was in Manhattan with his practice on Park Avenue. Gerson eventually came to Manhattan because he was a German Jew. He lost his entire family in the Holocaust. So when Hitler came to power, he narrowly escaped death and came over to Manhattan and set up practice on Park Avenue in Manhattan, literally on the same corner as Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of the largest cancer research hospitals in the world. C.J. Sloan himself called Dr. Gerson a notable quack. And so a notable quack, clearly notable, not the quack, right? And so Gerson's treating people for all their conditions and TB. He had no idea he could cure cancer when a woman approached him with terminal stomach, liver, and gallbladder cancer, all three. And he refused to treat her. He refused to treat her when he was in the United States back in the mid-30s. Why? Because even back then, to treat cancer with nutrition as a medical doctor, you were stepping outside the realm of your licensure, and you ran the risk of being ridiculed, ostracized, and at worst, lose your license. So he refused. But she kept coming back. She kept coming back. She kept coming back, and finally said, okay, I'll agree to treat you, and I'll treat you in secret. And so he treated her in secret and completely cured all three of her cancers. He had no idea he could do that up to this point, and he cured her cancer. And it was at that point where he said, I can no longer turn my face away from this deadly scourge of cancer. And he dedicated the rest of his life to treating advanced cancer. And so here we are, the year 2024, and still the cure for cancer has not been found. Well, you've had the opportunity to hear about Gerson in the international press on probably 6, 7 occasions in the last 60, 70, 80 years after he testified in 1946 before the United States Senate, which today is in the U.S. archives. That actual testimony is in the United States archives, document number 8947 in the United States Archives building on Capitol Mall between the Lincoln Memorial, or excuse me, the Washington Monument and the Capitol. So if you're in the Capitol Mall there's the U.S. Archives building. Document number 8947 is Dr. Gerson's word-for-word testimony before the United States Senate, or this book right here, The American Experience of Dr. Max Gerson, Censored for Curing Cancer, also chronicles his 1946 testimony before the United States Senate, where Senator Claude Pepper, who to this day remains the longest serving congressman and senator in U.S. history, said Dr. Gerson dedicated his life to the mastery of this scourge of cancer, and all should honor his great work. And so here we are again, 80 years later now, and there still is the massive censorship of Dr. Gerson. You have major supporters of the Gerson therapy who are world famous. King Charles. King Charles, a month and a half ago, denied chemo. And what do you think he's doing? He's more than likely doing the Gerson therapy. Why? Well, because a woman by the name of Beata Bishop, who I've had the privilege of having lunch with on a couple of occasions, wrote a book called The Time to Heal. She's a former BBC reporter, had terminal melanoma, and we completely cured her. And we completely cured another friend of King Charles. And no doubt about it, that's what he's doing right now. And probably Kate Middleton. If you saw Kate Middleton at Wimbledon this weekend, she looked pretty darn good. And I find it be pretty hard pressed to believe she's doing chemotherapy looking the way she looked on Sunday. So, the Gerson therapy is renowned to a lot of people, and a lot of these people, famous people, have tried to get it out into the international, public and into the press. But King Charles has been shut down every time he's talked about it. Sting, his wife Trudy, is one of the major contributors to the Gerson therapy. They're all shut down. They can't get it out. Why? Because when it goes to the editorial rooms, it gets cut off. Why? Because what do you see every single day when you're reading a newspaper, reading a magazine, watching TV, listening to the radio? You're bombarded with drug ads, drug ads, drug ads, and drug ads. So if you're an editor of any major media outlet, your sole fiscal responsibility is to promote the financial interests of your organization, not to give you or I the truth. And so when it gets into the editorial rooms, it gets censored. Simple as that. You don't bite off the hand that feeds you. You release the information on the Gerson therapy, the drug companies pull their drug ads, and you are without a job. And that is a fact. In the book, The American Experience of Max Gerson, written in 1956, Raymond Graham Swing of ABC News Radio released what he heard in the testimony of Dr. Gerson for the United States Senate. He was the anchor for ABC News Radio for 30 years at that point, and he was fired from his job 2 weeks later after he revealed Dr. Gerson's treatment. I talk more about that in that video that I told you to take a look at that I published 2 weeks ago. And it's in the book, The American Experience of Max Gerson, Censored for Curing Cancer. So that's the history of the Gerson therapy. Dr. Gerson was successfully reversing these diseases 100 years ago. So think about the power of those people who are able to keep this information from us for over 100 years, because that is the reality. And now YouTube and Google last August, September, came out with international public policy based on the guidelines of the World Health Organization and the pharmaceutical and medical industry. And they came out with new public policy to protect the public from medical fraud. And who do you think was front and center? The Gerson therapy. Front and center. So overnight, by default, being one of the faces of the Gerson therapy, I became one of the most censored doctors in the world at this point. By default, just because of my association with the Gerson therapy. So what is the Gerson therapy? Why is it so successful? I always get the question, what makes the Gerson therapy so successful? And the simple answer is because it's the hardest. The Gerson therapy is the most disciplined, regimented therapy that anybody can possibly do to reverse their advanced or their non-advanced disease. And so there are no shortcuts to healing. No supplement, no IV, no drug, chemotherapy, they will not heal you of your disease. Only a radical dietary detoxification and very specific supplementation regime will reverse these diseases. And so what is it? What's the scientific rationale, first of all, behind the Gerson therapy? And how does the Gerson therapy address those issues? So let's start there. Now, all these diseases today, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, cancer, your autoimmune diseases, in the last couple decades, they've been labeled what? Metabolic diseases. Have you heard that term? Metabolic diseases? Well, that's what they're labeled as. They're called metabolic diseases. Now, what does that mean? It's simple. It's so simple a child can understand. These diseases are all simply breakdown in metabolism. Metabolism is the most basic, essential foundation of life in every single organism. And what does metabolism mean by definition? Well, metabolism by definition is the breakdown of food into energy. Again, the most basic, essential foundation of life is that we eat food, our body breaks down the food, and it converts energy. And that energy is what sustains us on a daily basis until we die. When we die, our body stops producing energy. Simple. And so the immune system on a daily basis needs massive amounts of energy to function properly and survive. And we do everything humanly possible to destroy metabolism from the day we're born to the day we get sick and to the day we die. Is there any wonder why one of the greatest precipitating causes of cancer today is what? Obesity. Well, obesity certainly are errors in metabolism, right? Now, there's a lot of other factors that go into what's going to determine whether or not someone gets cancer, but obesity is one of the primary risk factors of whether or not you're going to get cancer, among other diseases, right? So, metabolic diseases, okay? And you have to restore metabolism. Now, I'm going to take you through the 4 stages of metabolism that Dr. Gerson recognized and how he addressed them to heal the human body. Okay. Dr. Gerson himself, if you read his book before he died, he published a book called The Cancer Therapy Results of 50 Cases. If you read that book over and over and over again, he mentions one word: metabolism. So the scientists have come out and labeled these things metabolic diseases over the last 20, 30 years. Gerson was talking about metabolism 100 years ago. And so if you're going to heal the human body, you have to restore metabolism, because these diseases are a breakdown in metabolism, which again, by definition, is the breakdown of food into energy. So the human body creates energy by the consumption of food. Now, it prefers glucose in order to do that. So your body breaks down the food, it breaks it down into its individual parts: protein, fat, glucose, and it takes that glucose to the cell. And inside the cell, you have these little things called mitochondria. And mitochondria take sugar, and in the presence of oxygen, they convert it into energy. If oxygen isn't present to get into the cell, to react with in the mitochondria to convert that glucose into energy, it goes into anaerobic glycolysis, is what it's called, and lactic acid is formed. Okay, so in order to break glucose down in the cell into energy, it requires oxygen. And we're going to go through that on a cellular level as to how we're destroying that capacity, which is ultimately causing disease. Okay, so again, the body breaks down the food, it takes the glucose and converts it into energy. Now, the body can use fat to create energy, but it doesn't want to use fat to create energy. Only in times of starvation does the body ultimately want to use fat to create energy. Its preferred source of fuel is glucose. So all these people out there, you ketogenic supporters, who tell you that when you have cancer, you don't want to eat carbs and sugar because the sugar is going to feed the cancer. There's nothing more false than that statement. If sugar fed cancer, we'd be leading people straight to their graves quicker than they would get there naturally. Why? Because sugar, not only doesn't it not feed cancer, it is responsible for healing cancer. And you're going to understand why when we're finished here. So, the body takes glucose. It carries it to the cell. It has to get it into the cell, and it needs oxygen in order to convert it into energy. And that all takes place in the mitochondria inside the cell. And so, well, let's break it down from the beginning. How do you heal the human body, restoring metabolism? How does the Gerson therapy do it? And how did we do it on our advanced Gerson therapy, where we took Dr. Gerson's principles and we expounded on them by adding a few things to our own therapy. So, if metabolism is the breakdown of food into energy, well, where does the breakdown of food take place? In the gut. Is it any wonder that we're taught that 70% of your immune system is where? It's in the gut, where the breakdown of food takes place. Well, we've single-handedly destroyed the gut from the day we're born again to the day we get sick. How? All the processed foods, antibiotics, pharmaceutical medications, filthy air, filthy water, stress, all of these things add up decade after decade after decade. And it's typically around the fifth, sixth decade where most of our patients are coming in with advanced cancer. So really between 50 and 60, that's pretty much our demographic. Now, again, that's not everyone. They're getting younger and younger as we go on generation after generation. So, each generation that's been born is constitutionally weaker than the generation before it because of all the things that we've been exposed to going forward. So, in order to heal the human body, you must heal the digestive tract. And there's only one way to heal the digestive tract, and that's food. So when the greatest physician who ever lived, Hippocrates, said, let food be your medicine and your medicine be your food, well, that's what he meant. You start by healing the digestive tract with food. You cannot heal it with supplements. You can support the healing with supplements, and that's why they're called supplements, because they're supposed to be supplemented with diet, right? So how does the Gerson therapy address the healing of the digestive tract with food? 20 pounds of organic fruits and vegetables every single day, mostly in the form of juices. Every day you are getting 13 fresh pressed juices every hour on the hour from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And every hour they have to be made. They can't be made for the day, stored in the refrigerator, and drank throughout the day. You can't do it that way. Because as soon as that thing comes off the press, air, light, oxygen starts to break down the nutritional value, the enzyme content of that juice, which is so vital for healing. So on the Gerson therapy, Dr. Gerson was absolutely adamant that the patient drink those juices immediately, every hour on the hour. For how long if you have advanced cancer? 2 years. It's a 2-year therapy. Now, in the beginning, it's very intensive for the first 3 to 6 months. And then as you go on, you're gradually being weaned off the therapy. But the entire process takes 2 years. And people are like, you mean for 2 years I have to dedicate my life to juicing every single day? And then there's other things that we're going to talk about that you have to do on top of the juicing in order to heal the human body. And the answer is, well, yeah. I mean, you've spent 5, 6, 7 decades destroying your body with all these things all these factors that go into the destruction of the human body. The fact that you can reverse an advanced terminal disease within 2 years is, I guess God's definition of mercy, right? And so that's terminal cancer, right? If you have all these other diseases, some of these other diseases, they don't take quite as long, okay? Some take 6 months, some take 9, some take 12, and they're on lesser protocols. But when we're dealing with advanced cancer, it's a 2-year protocol and it's a daily regime. And so On the Gerson therapy, it's the consumption of 20 pounds of organic fruits and vegetables every single day. Lots of carrots, lots of greens. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that right now. This is a general overview, but that's what the basic standard foundation of the therapy is. There are 3 meals per day that constitutes those 20 pounds, but 17 pounds of those are fresh pressed juices every hour on the hour. And guess what? If you have a centrifugal juicer, you know those juicers that have the fast spinning basket, you cannot get well. Dr. Gerson found out early on, and let me give you an example of the Breville, okay? The Breville is a centrifugal juicer. He could not get people well on the Breville, on a juicer like the Breville. Why? Well, he didn't know why. All he knew, based on his empirical findings when he was treating people, he could not get them well on centrifugal juicers. So he sent the juicer to a physicist, and the physicist came back to him and said, the juices are negatively charged. The centrifugal force of the juicer is producing a positive charge, and it's destroying and deactivating the enzyme content of the juice. And so when you do the Gerson therapy, you have to use other juicers other than a centrifugal juicer. We recommend 3 juicers. The pure juicer, which is the Cadillac of juicers, it's like $2,500. The angel juicer, which is like I think it's a twin grind where it crushes the fruits and the vegetables and creates a really nice juice. I think that's around $1,500. The cheapest version that we recommend is the Green Star. The Green Star is a really great, durable, twin gear crushing juicer that, you know, requires a little more elbow grease than the other two, but it's like $570, but it creates a fantastic juice and it preserves the quality of that juice. So these little intricate things about the Gerson therapy that made Gerson such a finely packaged genius are so absolutely vitally important when you're trying to maximize your ability to heal yourself of a degenerative disease, and most notably and most certainly advanced cancer. So we've got the juicing. We've got the organic food. If it's not organic, folks, the chances of survival are between slim and none for various reasons and obvious reasons, some not so obvious reasons. Non-organic food does not have the nutrient content that organic food does, that's been grown in composted, broken down material, whereas your non-organic food has been grown in artificial fertilizers. You know, it's been sprayed with toxic chemicals, but maybe what you don't know as well is when it goes to market, they irradiate it. And they irradiate it so they can store it on the shelves for longer and it doesn't die off and get and rot as quickly. Because if you can radiate something, you can kill off the enzyme activity in it and you can store it for longer. Organic produce doesn't have any of those factors. It's really, you know, and that's arguable now, you know, some of it, and they may now, the USDA certification is a little more lenient when it comes to certain chemicals or maybe, you know, fertilizers that can be used. I don't know the details of that, but I know it's a little more lenient than your other certification processes like the Oregon Tilt, the California organic, you know, laws, the Midwest organic laws that used to permeate organic produce. Now everybody's on the USDA bandwagon, probably because it's cheaper to get certified and the restrictions are probably a little more lenient. But nevertheless, it's still grown in composted material. What they're allowed to spray on it at certain periods of its development, I really don't know, but I'm sure there's some, you know, more lenient rules to that in this day and age. Nevertheless, it still has to be organic if you want any chance of healing. All right. So to heal the gut, it's food, massive amounts of juicing. Now, with that, there's other things that we give on the Gerson therapy and our advanced Gerson therapy to support the healing of the gut. Like what? Well, obviously we need to restore the natural gut flora that we've destroyed through all the processed foods, alcohol, all the air, the water, all of those things, and most notably antibiotics. So while on the therapy, we give a supplement called Gut Restore. Now, Gut Restore is created by my good friend Shan Stratton. Shan Stratton is called the nutritionist to the pros. Some of his clients would include Maria Sharapova, Kurt Warner, Larry Fitzgerald. He treats over 500 of your major league athletes, baseball, football, NBA, have all been taking Shan Stratton supplements. Now, this supplement, now you buy a probiotic supplement, even a high quality probiotic supplement, at a health food store. If you look on the ingredients, you'll see 5 or 6 strains of your lactobacilli, your bifidobacterium. This one contains over 13, 14, or 15 strains of different bacteria to colonize, again, the gut. And so while the patients are on the therapy, we will give Shan Stratton's Gut Restore to our patients. It's a very vital aspect, we believe, to restore the healing capacity of the gut, which again is 70% of your immune system. What else do we give? We give something called S. boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii. What's that? Well, it's another bacteria that occupy the gut flora naturally, and it's the one that's most destroyed by antibiotics. So because almost all of us, probably 100% of us, have had antibiotics at some point in our life, we've destroyed the natural Saccharomyces boulardii content of our natural gut flora. So we believe by just supplementing with this for maybe 3 to 6 months, after that, we don't see the need. We supplement with Saccharomyces boulardii. So that's something that we do to enhance the healing on our advanced Gerson therapy. Now, something else that we've added to the diet is pure, unadulterated, raw aloe vera. And that pure, unadulterated, raw aloe vera is grown in the Dominican Republic organically. It's harvested, hand-filleted, immediately frozen, and was sent to us. And when we received it, it was still frozen. When you buy aloe at the health food store, it's no good. It's been deodorized, it's been decolorized, and it's been loaded with preservatives so that it can stay on the store shelf. Its healing power is virtually nil. And so the reason why they have to add all the preservatives and stuff is because, like any fruit or vegetable, it breaks down. When we get the aloe vera, within 5 days of thawing it, it ferments and breaks down like any fruit or vegetable. So when we receive it, it's still frozen. We allow it to thaw, and as soon as it's thawed, we immediately transfer it to 9 different 59-ounce bottles, and we refreeze it and take it out as we need it. There's not a more potent healer of the digestive tract than aloe vera. That's why when you're sunburned or when you have a burn or a wound, you're told to do what? Put pure aloe vera on it, because it's such a potent healer of the epithelial lining of the cell. So we would put that pure, unadulterated, raw aloe vera straight into the patient's juices to streamline the healing of the digestive tract. What else do we do to support the patient's digestive tract? Because when they come in, you have to understand that their digestive tracts are shot. And so as we're healing and restoring the digestive tract, we have to optimally break down food into energy, metabolism, right? So while we're trying to heal the gut, we have to support the gut with enzymes. So we give enzymes. This is betaine HCl with pepsin, also called acidol. Betaine HCl is hydrochloric acid. And pepsin is, the stomach acid that helps to break down proteins as well. And so we give this enzyme as support while we're healing the gut. Over time, you shouldn't need this once the gut is healed. But for the first year, at least, you have to supplement with enzymes to support the body's ability to break down food while you're healing the gut, because it can't yet efficiently break down food. And with that said, Dr. Gerson's therapy has a laundry list of forbidden foods, which you and I might think are healthy, but for a cancer patient, they're really not a good strategy. in order to heal the digestive tract. For example, there's no avocados, there's no nuts and seeds. There's really not, you can have a little bit of a very special kind of rye bread, but your wheats and, a lot of your other breads, you simply can't have. So there's a laundry list of things that Dr. Gerson had on his forbidden foods list for various reasons. And that's because of how it disrupted the healing of the digestive tract. The juices, they enter the bloodstream almost as quickly as alcohol does, without the energy required to extract the nutrients out of the fiber, process the fiber. The body simply couldn't handle 20 pounds of fiber. Obviously, a healthy human being can't handle that, let alone a sick and dying immune system and digestive tract. So juicing was the answer for Gerson because it required very little energy to convert that into energy and to start to begin to heal the epithelial lining of the gut. So, but there are forbidden foods that a cancer patient on the Gerson therapy cannot eat. And, maybe in another live event, we can talk more about that. That's not for, right now, but, you have to be very careful when you're trying to heal an advanced disease on what a patient can and cannot have, because a lot of foods that are healthy for you and I, for a cancer patient or an advanced disease patient, will be very destructive. So we give a lot of enzymes, especially in the beginning. Here's another one, pancreatin, the pancreatic enzymes, which is lipase, amylase, and trypsin. And so those go to help break down the food once it bypasses the stomach and enters into the duodenum, into the intestinal tract, where the pancreas acts upon it by secreting its enzymes. So this is how Gerson addressed the issue of restoring the digestive tract. The first phase of metabolism, the breakdown of food into energy. You have to restore the body's ability to break down food, which we've destroyed over decades. Now, once you've healed the gut, you still have to restore 3 other aspects of metabolism. So now you're able to break down the food. Now you're able to get that food into the bloodstream. Now that food, particularly the glucose, has to get into the cell to be broken down by the mitochondria inside the cell into energy. So let's talk about the cell. Around your cells, you have something called a cell membrane. That cell membrane is made up of what? It's made up of fats. What kind of fats? Well, whatever fats you're feeding it. Whatever fats you're feeding your body's naturally going to use to maintain your cell membranes. Well, what kind of fats is everyone eating today? Saturated fats, right? Cookies, cake, ice cream, meat, cheese, dairy, all of these oils that we're eating today. Have you ever read a label and it says partially hydrogenated oil, right? Well, that's what everyone's eating today. And all those oils are going to make up that cell membrane. Why is this significant? Now, remember, there's 4 phases of metabolism. One is the gut. The next phase is you have to be able to get oxygen into the cell, okay? If you can't get oxygen into the cells, you can't convert the sugar into energy. Just like when you start a fire, if the fire doesn't have oxygen, you're not going to start that fire. It's the same exact principle when you're trying to create glucose into energy. It requires oxygen. And this really is the crux of the matter as it relates to most diseases today. We have destroyed the ability to get oxygen into the cells, and it's due to primarily the consumption of the fats that we're eating that go to make up the cell membrane. And this is fascinating biochemistry 101 science. So let's talk about fats for a second. You've got saturated fats, you have monosaturated fats, and you have polyunsaturated fats. What does that mean? We've heard these terms, but what does that mean? Your fats are carbon chains. They can be short carbon chains, medium carbon chains, or long carbon chains. And they're defined saturated, monosaturated, or polyunsaturated based on their saturation or their non-saturation with hydrogen. Okay? So a saturated fat are carbon chains that have been saturated with hydrogen, like a partially hydrogenated oil that you read on an ingredient label. Companies have learned they can bubble hydrogen into their products and they can store them on the shelf till Christ comes home because the hydrogen stabilizes the fat. Take cholesterol, for example. Cholesterol is so highly saturated, it can remain stable at body temperature, which is why it can clog arteries because it doesn't have a melting point inside the body at 98.6 that can break it down and solidify or liquidize it because it's so highly saturated with hydrogen. Let's talk about monosaturated fats, olive oil. Some of its bonds are saturated, some aren't. Okay. And then you have polyunsaturated fats, which are fats with carbon chains that have absolutely no hydrogen. They are commonly referred to as your essential fatty acids. You've probably heard that term, but what does that mean? When you hear the term essential fatty acid, it means the body cannot manufacture it. You must get it from your diet. Saturated fats are never labeled essential fatty acids. Why? Because your body can manufacture saturated fats. Your body cannot manufacture polyunsaturated fats, so you have to get them from your diet. Why is this so significant as it relates to the fat content of that cell membrane? Because when you have a cell membrane made up of saturated fats, that hydrogen, if you're consuming saturated fats, the hydrogen at the level of the cell membrane, as oxygen goes to approach that cell, the charge at the level of the cell membrane literally repels the oxygen away. So you cannot properly oxygenate cells if you have an acidic diet. You've heard an acidic diet, right? You've heard of alkalinity and acidity. We hear this all the time in natural medicine. An alkaline diet promotes health, an acidic diet promotes disease. We hear it all the time, but it's never really explained what are the clinical implications and the scientific implications of those two terms. When we're talking about alkalinity and acidity, what are we talking about? We're talking about pH, right? Potential hydrogen. So when you have an acidic diet, what's associated with an acidic diet? Meat, cheese, dairy, all your processed foods, all the garbage that people are eating today that are high in saturated fats. So again, pH, potential hydrogen. When you have a buildup of hydrogen in the body, and particularly at the level of the cell membrane, as oxygen approaches that cell membrane, it literally gets repelled away because it cannot accept it due to the electrical charge. And this would include nutrient absorption, detoxification out of the cell, nutrient absorption into the cell. All of those are affected because that cell membrane is the gatekeeper. It determines what can go in and what can go out. And it's all dependent on the electrical charge at the level of the cell membrane, and that is determined by the non-hydrogen fats that we need to be eating in order to start getting oxygen, the essential fatty acids. So today, everybody's cells are loaded with hydrogen at the level of the cell membrane, and you cannot get oxygen into the cell to convert your glucose into energy. So how did Gerson address this? On the Gerson therapy, there are absolutely no saturated fats. None. The wonderful thing that we use on the Gerson therapy, it's the only oil that Gerson found did not cause tumors to grow. And that's raw flax oil. You don't cook with it. You don't do anything with it other than eat it raw. And so on a daily basis, our patients get raw flax oil. It is a pure polyunsaturated fatty acid. It's pure medicine. Why? Because that has no hydrogen bonds. And when you start to take flax oil and restore the cell membranes with that polyunsaturated fat, as oxygen approaches the cell, it literally acts as a magnet to draw oxygen into the cell. Its electrical charge is literally magnetic. And so it is pure medicine. And Gerson instinctively understood he needed to restore the charge at the level of the cell membrane. Not only that, the juicing. When you drink a juice, if you test juice with litmus paper, fresh pressed juice, do you know it actually tests acidic? But when you drink it, it gets broken down into potassium hydroxide, OH negative molecules. Hydroxide is written OH negative. It gets broken down into potassium hydroxide, which is a highly alkaline agent. And so we have all this acidic hydrogen running through the body at the level of the cell membrane as well. Well, guess what happens when you start drinking fresh pressed juices, which are highly alkaline with OH negative molecules? OH negative, H positive acidic molecules react. OH negative reacts with H positive. Voila. You create H2O, water. Neutral charge, oxygen again, can start pouring into the cells. So we've healed the gut. We've restored the cell with the proper fats by getting saturated fats out of the diet. Absolutely no meat, no cooking with oils, no butter, no animal products on the Gerson therapy, other than at 6 weeks, we add in non-fat organic yogurt into the diet. That was very essential in Dr. Gerson's eyes, to add non-fat organic yogurt, no saturated fats. So that's how you restore the second phase of metabolism, which requires oxygen. In 1931, Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for demonstrating that cancer viruses and bacteria can't survive in a body where the cells are properly oxygenated. And he went on to describe that the body's primary ability to oxygenate cells was an alkaline diet and the proper fats. And so there you go. That's the second phase of healing. Now, you have to heal the third phase of metabolism that Dr. Gerson saw as absolutely essential, and that's the inside of the cell. Okay? So remember, inside the cell, where we're getting all the nutrients, all the glucose, oxygen to convert it into energy, we have to restore the internal integrity of the cell, because we have destroyed it from the day we're born to the day we get sick. And how do we do that? Salt. So here's a normal cell. Today, here's everyone else's cells. Everyone's cells today are swelled up with salt and water because we consume massive amounts of sodium on a daily basis. Do you know the body's nutrient needs for sodium is like 230 milligrams per day? That's the body. It's called the body's obligatory loss of sodium. That is what the human body needs on a daily basis to maintain optimal health. 230 milligrams of sodium. That's about less than a quarter of a teaspoon. Do you know today we're consuming probably 10 or 20 or maybe 50 times more than that on a daily basis? Do you know 1 teaspoon of soy sauce contains 2,000 milligrams of sodium? I think that's what it contains. You can look it up on the ingredient label. And so today, we are consuming massive amounts of salt. And what's happening is then salt and water enters the cell and it gets trapped in the cell. And so the mitochondria inside the cell cannot function in that environment. They can't function. It's like trying to function in a tsunami. And so on the Gerson therapy, there's absolutely no sodium, none whatsoever, other than what naturally occurs in fruits and vegetables. And that salt and water is trapped. It can't get out. The only way that it can get out is if you bombard the body with potassium. There's a law in the human body. You eat salt, the body dumps potassium. You eat potassium, the body dumps salt. Well, the cellular integrity of the internal portion of the cell is completely dependent on the potassium content within the cell. So with all the bagged, boxed, canned, the added salt on food, if you eat out at restaurants, that food is so heavily salted, and then chances are you're probably adding more salt to it. And then all your processed foods, bagged, canned, bottled, they're loaded with sodium. And so today we have a serious health crisis as it relates to salt, not just high blood pressure and heart disease. It's the major component of all diseases today is sodium. And so the only way you can get that trapped salt and water out of the cells is potassium. And so you're getting lots of potassium in the juices, lots of potassium. But Gerson didn't feel it was enough. So he created, after 300 different experiments, his potassium compound solution. And so this potassium compound solution goes into each juice. And what happens? Within 2 to 3 weeks, all our patients and their companions would lose 5 to 15 pounds of water weight in that time frame. All of us are harboring probably 5 to 15 pounds of excess salt and water because it's trapped in our cells. And not only is it adding to our weight, but more importantly, it's destroying our metabolism. So we all have to get salt and water out of the cells, and the only way is through the potassium in fruits and vegetables. And Gerson added this potassium compound powder. All right. And so what's happening now on the Gerson therapy is all that salt and water are rushing out of the cell and restoring the cell back to its original integrity. And that is how you restore the third phase of metabolism. It's absolutely ingenious. Nobody on the planet today is doing that unless they're doing the Gerson therapy. So we've healed the gut. We've restored the electrical potential at the level of the cell membrane with the proper fats and getting all the saturated fats out of the diet. We've now gotten all sodium out of the diet other than what naturally occurs in fruits and vegetables. And we've bombarded the body with potassium to restore the internal integrity of the cell so that the little mitochondria inside the cell can convert food into energy. Now, on a side note, here's something very interesting. You cannot heal on a high protein diet for this very purpose, this very reason that we just mentioned, sodium. So when I say a high protein diet, what does that typically mean? The ketogenic diet, right? Or even the high fat content of the ketogenic diet. You cannot heal on a high fat, high protein diet. Why? When you eat a high fat or high protein diet, because of the hydrogen content, you create a system of acidity, right? And that sets up an emergency state in the body. When our bodies become acidic, that sets up an emergency state in the body. Why? Because at like 7.0 or below, all our enzyme systems would shut down. So our body has buffering systems to maintain the pH at a certain level so that the enzyme systems don't shut down or you would die. So when we eat a high acidic diet, first you have the calcium buffering system where the body will take bone and break down bone and put calcium into the bloodstream in order to neutralize the acidity. But here's another way that it does it. When you're highly acidic from a high protein, high fat diet, your kidneys in that emergency state have to dump that acidity. Now, your kidneys on a daily basis preferentially want to dump 250 milligrams of sodium, as I mentioned earlier, the body's obligatory loss of sodium. When you're acidic, you bypass that dumping of sodium because now the kidneys must dump the acidity in exchange for the sodium because that acidity is so detrimental to life. And so the kidneys now, rather than preferentially wanting to dump sodium, will now dump the acidity in exchange for the sodium and water. So that third phase of metabolism where you have to get salt and water out of the cells, you can't do it if you're eating a high fat, high protein diet. You can't, because the kidneys now will uptake sodium back into the cells in order to dump the acidity. And a classic example that I would give my patients and their companions is this, and it was only for the companions, because when the companions would come to the clinic, they would also lose all that salt and water. So their rings would just slide right off their fingers, because when you start losing all the salt and water, all that puffiness and the tissue tension, it goes away. So when they would walk into the clinic, they'd be all bloated, their skin would be all tight, swelled up with salt and water. But by the time they left, that was being all taken out. So I would tell them, the companions, go home, do this for a month. After a month, go out and have a big steak and tell me what happens the next day. And what happens is what? Well, they go out, they have their big steak. The next morning, they can't get their rings off their fingers. Why? Because the body now, the kidneys are having to dump the acidity generated by that big steak in exchange for the salt and water swelling up the tissues again. And so this is a classic example of why in 10, 15 years, if not sooner than that, we're going to look back at the ketogenic diet for healing cancer and all these other diseases as absolute lunacy. Just like the Atkins diet for weight loss, which is essentially the modern ketogenic diet. What we found was that in the beginning, yeah, the Atkins diet certainly helped in weight loss for about the first 3 to 6 months. And then what happened? Everybody's metabolism started shutting down. One, because of the high hydrogen content in the high fat diet. Two, because of all the sodium and water that was still being trapped in the cells and continued to be going into the cells because of the high acidic diet of the Atkins diet or the ketogenic diet. It's lunacy. The way you heal the human body is a vegetarian, for the most part, vegetarian diet. Simple as that. You cannot heal on a high fat, high protein diet. End of story. All right. We've healed the gut. We healed the cell membrane. We healed the internal integrity of the cell. There's one more thing on the Gerson therapy that Dr. Gerson found essential to restoring the human body: the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland. If you're overweight, you're cold all the time, you're low energy, your hair's falling out, the hairs on the side of your eyebrows is falling off, we say that you're hypothyroid. It's one of your main metabolic organs with your liver. What's the thyroid's main responsibility in the human body? It's to reproduce mitochondria. Those little cells inside your body that convert, those little organelles inside your body that convert glucose into energy, the thyroid gland is specifically responsible for replicating mitochondria. And so, Gerson instinctively understood you had to restore the function of the thyroid gland, which from the day we're born to the day we get sick, we destroy the thyroid gland. Why? Well, what's the thyroid gland dependent on? Iodine, right? The thyroid gland is dependent on iodine. Well, salt, which is what? Sodium chloride. That chloride molecule in salt displaces iodine from the thyroid gland. So salt has completely destroyed the thyroid gland today. Now, people say, well, I don't eat table salt, I eat the good salt. Well, there's no such thing as good salt. There's such thing as better salt, but there's no such thing as good salt. Table salt's 99.9% sodium chloride. Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, Dead Sea salt, it's 87% sodium chloride. That's why the Dead Sea is dead. It can't support biological life. The chloride molecule in salt displaces iodine from the thyroid gland. That's why when they first originally came out with table salt, it was 100% sodium chloride. And everybody started walking around looking like turkeys because it got goiter. Well, what did they do to it? Once that happened, what did they do to salt? They iodized it, right? Just enough so you don't look like a turkey. It's still destroying your internal metabolism by slowly breaking down subclinically the thyroid gland until you're sick or you have hypothyroidism, right? So, again, no salt. And Gerson bombarded the body with iodine in the form of Lugol solution, which is potassium iodide, which is a non-toxic form of iodine. So the patients get Lugol solution in, I think 9 of their juices, 8 or 9 of their juices on a daily basis. And they do that for pretty much the entire 2 years. Now, it's front loaded in the beginning, and then you're gradually weaned off as time goes on. But in the beginning, Gerson instinctively understood that these thyroid glands were depleted. And so he had to restore the thyroid gland because of chloride. And that would include chlorine in pools. You know, if talk to any of your world-class swimmers or people who swam their whole life in pools, a lot of them, you can walk up to them and say, how much thyroid hormone are you taking? Because it's destroyed, the chlorine in the pools has destroyed their thyroid glands, you know, as the years went on. So chlorine destroys the thyroid gland. What else destroys the thyroid gland? Fluoride. Where do we get fluoride from? Our water, obviously. We've been led to believe fluoride's good in toothpaste. It's not. It destroys the thyroid gland as well. And a lot of your drugs are made with fluoride, right? So, fluoride destroys the thyroid gland. There's one more thing, a little less conspicuous, that destroys the thyroid gland, and it's virtually in everyone's diet, and that is bromine. Bromine is highly destructive to the thyroid gland for the very same reason, because it displaces iodine from the thyroid gland. And where do you get bromine from? Bread. So they condition breads today with bromine. They used to condition it with iodine, but now they condition it with bromine. All right. That's why if you go into a health food store and you go to the bread section, you'll see bread made with unbrominated flour. All right. So our breads today are loaded with bromine. Where else are you getting bromine from? Your cooking oils. In fact, I think today the FDA actually banned brominated oils. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw a headline of that nature. So folks, we have destroyed the thyroid gland. And so you have to rebuild it. And you rebuild it by replenishing it with Lugol solution. And we also give natural thyroid hormone. And you have to take these two together, because as you stimulate the thyroid gland with natural thyroid hormone, you have to increase the iodine, because you increase the need for iodine by the thyroid gland. Another thing that we now give on the advanced Gerson therapy is an activated form of selenium. And the reason why is because the thyroid gland is completely dependent on selenium as well. Your whole body is. Like, of the 300 some odd enzyme systems in your body, almost every single one requires selenium. So we give selenium on this therapy for that reason, but also for the thyroid gland, which is really dependent on selenium. And all our soils today are depleted of selenium, probably because of the mercury-based pesticides that have been sprayed on them for decades at this point. Because the way the human body and the earth cleanses and detoxifies from mercury poisoning is selenium. So selenium is given on our advanced Gerson protocol, and even in normal Gerson circles, they've recognized the need for selenium. So this is how you properly restore the human body. You have to heal the gut. You have to restore the electrical charge at the level of the cell membrane so that you can get nutrients in, you can detoxify cells, but most importantly, get oxygen into the cell and convert sugar into energy. Okay? Then you have to heal the internal integrity of the cell, which we've destroyed from the consumption of sodium. The massive consumption of sodium. We are potassium animals. We are supposed to be eating massive amounts of fruits and vegetables on a daily basis and minimum sodium. And we have it reversed today. Nobody's eating the amount of potassium in their fruits and vegetables, and they're eating tons of sodium from all the processed foods, all the restaurant foods, adding salt to your cooking, to your food. We're destroying metabolism. So you can see that disease is no mystery. This is really simple stuff. You know, they make us believe that, these diseases are some grandiose, thing that we've yet to discover the cure and the reason for them. It's simple. It's literally so simple a child can understand. I learned metabolism to its core the first 2 weeks of Biochemistry 101. You are getting a lesson in Biochemistry 101, exactly what I learned the first 2 weeks of school at New York Chiropractic College. Simple stuff. In 1900, they said 1 out of every 60, some say 1 out of every 100 people got cancer. We're down to 1 out of every 3, going on 1 out of every 2. And by the year 2050, I think they say everyone's guaranteed to get some form of cancer in their lifetime. This is why. Genetics over 100 years don't change that rapidly. If anyone who understands, quote, Darwinian theory understands it takes millions of years for genetics to make those kinds of changes, right? So how is it from 1900 to 2024, there's been an exponentially parabolic rise in disease? Because between 1900 and now, there's been a massive expansion of the Industrial Revolution that's belched every poison into our air, our water, our food, the stress in our lives, our broken relationships. All of these things contribute to what we call disease today. And the answer is simple: the restoration of metabolism. And this is what made Gerson such a finely packaged genius. Now, one more thing that Gerson made famous that is absolutely essential to healing disease is the coffee enema. In conjunction with the diet, in conjunction with the very specific supplement protocol that Dr. Gerson laid out, you have to detoxify the human body. There is not a more potent way to detoxify the human body than a coffee enema. Yes, folks, that is true. And so let's talk about that for a second. Now, think about this. A patient's coming into the clinic. They're so toxic from a toxic lifestyle and the factors that are outside of their control, contributing to the toxicity of their body. Now they've got a massive disease process or a tumor in their body that's creating its own toxins from its own metabolism. Now you start giving them juices, which starts detoxifying and drawing poisons out of the cell into their bloodstream. That has to be detoxified. And as you do this therapy, you start to break down disease tissue, the tumors, the disease process itself, and that creates massive amounts of toxicity. Dr. Gerson lost his first few patients that he was treating because he didn't detoxify them quickly enough. So he had to come up with something. He had to come up with something to detoxify the liver. And his answer, the coffee enema. Now, how in the hell does a coffee enema up your rear end detoxify the human body? It's pure science. So your liver, it produces an enzyme called glutathione S-transferase. It's one of the most potent detoxifying enzymes in the human body. It is made in the liver by palmitic acid. Properly roasted, organic coffee preferably from a very specific bean that's not a low pH bean, your more acidic beans, which are grown and roasted for drinking, for aromas, right? But a more basic pH bean and lightly roasted is loaded with palmitic acid. And it has been scientifically demonstrated that when you do one coffee enema, the production of glutathione S transferase by the body goes up 600 to 700% greater than normal. That's scientific. And that is why on this therapy, without the coffee enema, we would not be able to heal the human body as we do with the consistency, if at all. So our patients on this therapy, they get 5 coffee enemas per day in the beginning of their therapy for at least the first 3 to 6 months, because that's what's required to be eliminating all the toxins that are being generated and circulating through the system. So the question is, well, how does the coffee get to my liver if I take it rectally? Well, sitting right there is what? Your hemorrhoidal veins, right? Your hemorrhoidal veins, hemorrhoids, they carry it to the portal vein, and the portal vein carries it and ends straight in the liver. So it goes straight to the liver, the palmitic acid salts, without being metabolized. Because people will say, oh, why can't I drink it? Well, because when you drink it, those palmitic acid salts get burned up in the digestive process and don't make it to the liver unadulterated. Anything you take rectally goes straight to the liver unadulterated. If you drink a bottle of vodka, you're going to get really sick. If you take a bottle of vodka rectally, you're dead in 20 minutes. Did you know that? Because it goes straight to the liver, unadulterated, unmetabolized, and you go into liver coma and you die. Stupid people have actually tried it, and that's what happened. And so when you take a coffee enema, it goes straight to the liver via the portal vein, completely unmetabolized, so the body can take that palmitic acid and create glutathione transferase. So that's it. That was Gerson's basic, essential tenets and foundations of his therapy. This is why Nobel Peace Prize winner Albert Schweitzer called him the most eminent genius in medical history. And this is why 8 movies have chronicled Dr. Gerson's work. And more importantly, this is why it remains the most censored therapy in the history of medicine. And again, I encourage you to find that video where I talk about how I and the Gerson therapy are being censored by the elites that are controlling the current agenda around the world. And so this is it. And so 10 months ago, when this censorship just took on a new form, we decided to shut down our clinical operations, and we've moved everything remotely, where we now have a 3-month home program where we treat everyone via live Zoom calls. We send 3 months of everything they need to their door, and we teach them everything they need to know in order to carry out this therapy at home, which is why they went to the clinic anyway, to learn the same information. Only to run a clinic is exponentially more expensive than doing a 3-month home program. I mean, had you come to our clinic for 2 to 3 weeks, you would have spent between $15,000 and $30,000. Whereas the 3-month home program, it's like $5,000, and you get 3 months of everything that you need on top of 3 months of consults with me and my 2 consultants, Suzanne Mulroy, who was supposed to be with us tonight, but she was feeling under the weather, and so I decided to take this all on without Suzanne. Hopefully she can join us in the future, because she's a former breast cancer patient who cured herself with the Gerson therapy after being diagnosed with breast cancer 3 separate times and doing conventional treatments. That don't work. They never work. They always come back after, it always comes back typically after 2 to 7 years. I can't tell you how often we have people calling us who've gone through conventional treatment, and within 2 to 7 years, they're calling us because it's back. And so if you don't radically change your diet and your lifestyle in conjunction with the principles of the Gerson therapy, that's what will happen across the board. Okay? So we now do a 3-month home program where we counsel everyone remotely. Now, should the conditions change at some point and we decide we're going to open a clinic, we'll let you know. But right now, that's not the case. And so that's what we do. And some of these supplements, all these supplements that I just pointed out to you that are on the Gerson therapy, you can actually get on our store, gersonclinics.com. So our website is gersonclinic.com and our store is gersonclinics.com, which you can also reach by just going to our website, but you can get direct to it by gersonclinics.com. And our Gerson Clinic website right now, we're having problems with it. So the host, the Bluehost, now when people plug in gersonclinic.com, they're getting all these other pages pop up telling you've got a virus in your phone, and it's not. It's all a scam. But someone's broken into this. There's a security breach at Bluehost on our website. So if you go to our website, gersonclinic.com, and something else pops up, just back out of it, put in gersonclinic.com again, and it should take you straight to our website. But they're already playing with our website as well. It's crazy. And so that's where we're at this point in time. But most importantly, how long have I been here? What time is it? What time we got here? Anyway, so there you go, folks. You know, this is the Gerson therapy, the foundations of it, right? Now, there's a lot more specificity as it relates to dosages, the kind of juices, the foods, the forbidden foods. But this is the basic scientific rationale behind why the Gerson therapy is so powerful in its ability to heal the human body through the restoration of metabolism. Okay? With that said, in closing, every second Tuesday and last Tuesday of the month, I'm going to start doing a live question and answer. So the last Tuesday of this month, I don't know the date yet. I have to look it up. We'll be promoting it on our Facebook page and all our social media outlets. You can look forward to those twice a month. I'm just going to take questions and answers from people. You know, they may be suffering with a condition or have questions regarding, you know, anything. So I'm going to try to do that every second and last Tuesday of every month, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern time, and you can join me then. But I think these automatically record, so I am not tech savvy, but I've been told they automatically record, so they'll probably be up on our Facebook page, and we'll load it up to all our other social media outlets at this point. But thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you have a basic understanding of the Gerson therapy, and it's not just some, you know, unknown concept that you've only heard about. Now that it can make perfect sense as to why this medical genius that walked among us, you know, was able to reverse virtually every single degenerative disease. All right. So good night from Fort Myers, Florida, which is where I currently reside. And hopefully we'll see you during my questions and answers. So have a good night. Now I just got to figure out all these. There's Facebook. There's that one. And I got one more. I got to get this Zoom call taken care of here. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate it. And you can look forward to the questions and answers coming up here a couple times a month. Thank you.